I'm here with Malcy this evening, and I'm a sort of placeholder for Hugh from Landfill, whose partner is on the brink of going into labour. So I've sort of stepped in his place, and it's quite fitting because Malcy and I both have books coming out with Landfill. So it's nice to kind of have a chance to talk to one of the other artists also making a book with Hugh. So we're just going to have a kind of 40-minute planned session with Malcy and myself talking about his work, and then Malcy also giving a reading, and then there'll be time for questions. So if anybody has questions, please just, I think it's fine just to chip in or put them in the chat, or otherwise at the end of the conversation we can maybe do that. So yeah, without further ado, Malcy, I don't know if you want to say anything before we start to share the book and talk about the new work you've been making.
Thanks, Charlie. So yeah, this is quite a special night for me actually because the Liminal Sneeze, as some of you will know, because I think I know there's some friends there tonight, and I was sending out the comic strip weekly last year, and Hugh was one of the people I was sending it to, and then he decided to publish it as a book. And although I always prefer sort of printed, like the printed format, it was really interesting working on something that was going out over email every week. But it feels right that it's finally sort of come to be a book now. I actually was looking for Battenberg cake to eat today because me and Hugh were joking that the book has turned out looking a bit like a Battenberg cake. But I couldn't find any, so we'll just have to. So if anyone has Battenberg cake with them tonight, that's fantastic. But anyway, yes. So yeah, I guess we can talk about it and chat about the book as we look at it and stuff. So yeah.
Great. So I can start sharing the screen. Just you have to bear with the technical gremlins, but hopefully it will all work as it should. So I hope Battenberg cake isn't another victim of Brexit. It just gets worse and worse. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see the Battenberg infused front cover of a Liminal Sneeze. So Malcy, I don't know if you want to kick things off or if we should just start clicking through slides, and then if there's some thoughts you want to share, and then maybe there's some questions I have about the work, which I'd like to ask you as we go, but maybe we can just go through.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could just say to start with, originally I had the idea for Liminal Sneeze as a kind of sort of newspaper style comic, and when lockdown happened, it completely changed, and so it became this other thing completely. So the format changed, the way I was making it changed, and yeah, so that's maybe just a wee sort of precursor to the book itself. It turned out very differently to how it may have done had everything last year not happened. So that was quite interesting in the work as well.
Right, and it's a series of weekly dispatches that you sent to a group of friends. So I wondered, were these unsolicited? Did you just indiscriminately pick people, or did you curate a group of friends that you decided to share this with?
Yeah, it was just my friends and people on my mailing list. I just started sending it out. I thought it was nicer than getting another one of my spam emails saying I have another comic out. So I thought it'd be nice to actually send the work. And actually, it was a really nice. I don't know. It was a really nice process to go through actually working on it every week, and like having something to work on each week, and then perhaps people would sort of send emails back and stuff. It felt like a really good way to keep connected with people over the time last year.
Right. And then did you want, or did you receive feedback, or was it just met with a kind of mute silence that you then just, the next week you threw things back out into the kind of cybersphere once more?
A lot of my stuff does have a mute silence effect, but that's okay. That's okay. But no, I mean, I had again, a lot of friends got in touch just to talk about it and see what they thought of it, and I think some people also said they really appreciated getting something each week. It was just kind of, I mean, I have to say it was also about myself. I enjoy the idea of like having a weekly comic and working on something each week. So that was a really enjoyable thing for me. But again, that thing of just sending it to people, connecting with people maybe I wasn't seeing or I haven't been in touch with for a while. And yeah, so there was some really nice emails sent back.
So that's
And the silence was okay too. The silence was okay too.
silence can be better than abject criticism sometimes.
Mm.
One of the things I noticed going through the images was that, text is key, that there's a link between text and image, and you have these kind of language, asides or comments. And, there's a drawing later on in the series where there's a tannoy, and it's kind of decided on behalf of the crowd, and it sort of answers their opinions for them. And there's butterflies that sing snatches of happy birthday. And then there's conversations where there's two people in this conversation, but it seems that they're almost indifferent to what one another's saying. So there's this funny idea of connection and the kind of figures in the work speaking to one another, but sometimes they're very droll kind of asides, and other times they're much more philosophical ponderings. And I found this kind of variation of language in the drawing really interesting. And I wondered, how was that kind of related to the time of which you were making the work, and this idea of wanting to connect?
I think that can I say I love the word droll as well. It's not used enough. I don't think I really like the word droll. I mean, I think that some of the strips that I was working on, I'd worked on before this all happened. So there was some pieces, and I'm not going to say which, but there was some pieces that I'd already kind of planned out a little bit, and then other pieces that just came to me during that particular time. And I mean, I work just very much with an image first. An image will come to me, and then I just usually work on that. I mean, it might be a line, it could be a line of dialogue or something, but it's usually an image, and then I'll work into that. And I think as far as language and the images go, I mean, I think there's also something about the way the words look, perhaps, and the shapes of them. I do stuff in sound as well, so I'm thinking about maybe how they sound, or I'm always interested in how a speech bubble can be formed as well, and what you're putting inside it and outside it. And it's all part of a process which I try not to think too much about, in a sense. I kind of just let it come out. But yeah, I and I don't know if that answers any of your question there, but yeah, that's kind of how I work usually. Just yeah, letting it happen. And I think with this comic in particular, it did feel like it was just kind of pouring out of me.
Mm-hmm.
It felt sort of very much like that. And what I did was, because I knew that I was working on the pieces every week, I just went with what I was doing that week. So an image would come to me, and I just kind of followed that, and that was that, really.
Yeah, these are some of the images in particular that really stuck out to me in terms of, we see here the kind of megaphone surmising what the crowd's been trying to decide, this philosophical notion of, was it the fist or the glove, and then you've got this on the previous drawing as well of the cow, and this is kind of philosophical ponderings, which just appears, and it seems to sit. It's kind of incongruous, and yet it sits so harmoniously amongst the other drawings. And I wonder if it's something to do with, there's such a Spartan quality to the line, and a letterbox. There's a beautiful drawing with a butterfly entering through a letterbox, and the letterbox is rendered with the same detail as the butterfly, as a car, as a crowd, so that everything is kind of given the same treatment, and it allows, there's really these really beautiful passages between those massive shifts of scale, and the kind of the barren flat surface of a wall is as delicate as this cow's body, which is just described by the statement that says rest of the cow.
Well, thank you very much. I think one thing I'd say about that is that, well, that's very kind for a start, but I do. What I'm really interested in line, in comics in particular, is this idea of the condensed line, and what information is in one line. Like you have, like I like drawing, shading of the cityscape, or people in that the drawing of the boxers. But it's the same line as going into all of those things, as you say. It's kind of there, like there with the nose stuck in a kind of pipe. That shading line is the same shading line that would be in the cityscape, and I just often wonder kind of what is in those lines, like what do they contain. And I really like that, and I think especially in comics that's something you can do, and you can have all these possibilities, but they're all very connected, like very immediately connected. And yeah, and I think there is a lot of information just one line here and there, and I think, like, I suppose in a lot of my work I like those sort of minute details, and finding something in those little things. But yeah, I like the line.
Yeah, this drawing on the left really grabbed me when I was looking through the work. And, it's funny that you talk about the idea of shading and the use of line that would be used to render a cityscape, for instance. And here it's doing something interesting where you really get at the feel of that kind. If you've ever put your hand through a letterbox, you know exactly how those bristles feel. And then you're doing a kind of conventional form of shading in a way, but it's about the real kind of materiality of that moment there, and the butterfly entering through I think there's a lot of movement, but in very subtle ways in the drawing, and it really seems, for such a Spartan amount of information, it's incredibly generous, it seems. And I wonder if is that then perhaps connected to the intimacy of this being a weekly dispatch that you're sending to friends, that presumably, I wondered if there's inside jokes in the work, if there's references that are very targeted to specific friends or moments or memories.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Although I think probably people that know me would, pick up on my humor or my way of seeing things, I guess, and that's, I guess that's for a sort of individual thing, really. But I think that I don't ever really think like that on purpose. I mean, I'm sure some stuff will come up that someone will say, oh, this looks like this, or that looks like that person, or some, and that definitely happens. But I don't think I ever do it on purpose, and I can't think of a time in this book where that happens. Yeah, I don't know. It might. Yeah, it could. It definitely could happen accidentally, for sure. But yeah.
Right.
I just wanted to interrupt, Charlie, just 1 second, because I know some people might have been a bit confused with the waiting room tonight, just because it had the wrong name on it. And I did just get a message from a friend saying they were waiting, so I'm just going to say they can come in. Sorry.
Enter.
Yeah, you're in the right place.
Normally there's a little pop-up thing that says someone is waiting and can they be admitted, as gatekeeper, and that hasn't.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not withholding entry for anyone. It's
I believe
the more the merrier. The reason I asked about the idea of kind of, not inside jokes, but maybe personal references, was because I think there's this real feeling of Mr. Worthington is in the waiting room.
Yes.
Enter, Mr. Worthington. I thought the drawings feel really intimate, and I'm not familiar. We don't go back for years, and yet I found that the intimacy I was able to connect to in the book, and I found myself, and I wonder if it's to do with the sense of space in the drawings, that there's this kind of, it's distilled between these kind of intricate and economic lines, and that actually there's something really humane and relatable about the drawings that have a warmth. That was coming to it completely, outside of it. Well, that's what I really experienced.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. I think actually, I think that can be probably taken with the idea of when it was made as well. I think, there's a definite intimacy about some of it, which I think is probably my other work too. But I think because I was working on it at a very sort of I guess like very delicate time, a time that, it was a difficult time, and I know it still is a difficult time, but I think thinking back to that point, um, things come out in your artwork, things come out in your music or whatever you're making that definitely relate to that specific time. And so I think the idea of intimacy and connection and all those things that we were missing and still are missing. I think a lot of that is definitely in the work, and again, I would say that came out because of that time, because of the period of time I was making it in, and of course that's probably going to have an effect on the actual drawings I'm making, the butterfly, the boxers cuddling. I mean, things like that. I think you could relate it all to that specific time for sure. But I think that's the thing. I work in a way that those things happen. It's more of like a kind of intuitive thing that I'm not specifically saying I'm going to make this comic about this thing. It's made at a particular time, and things will come into that that I don't feel I have much control over.
And then can I ask you, is the order, because as we're going through the spreads, you see that there's a chronology to the work. So is that reflective of the order that you sent them out in, and that's really fixed as an order?
Well, again, it was decided as I sort of went on each week. So I mean, there was a little bit of planning, obviously, but not. It wasn't much. It would be kind of like I had an idea for this week, and I'd work on that strip and finish it, and then it would go out. But I do. I mean, I can show you like my sketchbook here, like with some of the drawings. But I would be storyboarding things and doing like little sketches of characters that turn up in the book, things like that. But and there'd be like little bits of planning here and there. But really, I would just set myself, okay, this week I'm working on this strip, and this is the order that it's going to be. But I mean, the book does kind of it has a kind of resolution at the end. I think it kind of it comes back to the sort of starting point again. So there's a structure in that way. And again, like the character that's on that page there with the hat on, and that character's in a previous part of the comic as well. So there was some things that continued or came back to it as well.
I think that circularity really comes through, and like you say, certain figures reappear, or gestures, or visual forms. This kind of stanchion on the floor reoccurs at the end.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about the title Liminal Sneeze, and where that stems from? If you, well, maybe it's private and you don't want to divulge, but it's such a strange title that it's kind of begs questions.
Well, it actually, you see, this was the thing. I came up with the title before all of this happened. So I'd planned this idea off like a newspaper style comic called The Liminal Sneeze. I'm quite interested in liminality and that kind of in between. I think it also fits really well with the kind of work that I do as well. I've always felt quite in between a lot of things, and so I'd been training as an art therapist, and an art therapist had said to me, "Oh, liminality is a really interesting thing," and so we started talking about that. Anyway, so I'd been thinking about that, and I just liked the title. I liked this idea of a liminal sneeze. And then of course lockdown happened, and COVID happened, and it seemed very sort of, I suppose, strange, and a strange coincidence that it just fits so well with again the time that we're in, this idea of liminality and this in between time, and so it was the right, it just was what it was. I don't know, it just that's what happened with it. But yeah, it was a title that I really liked, and I think as well with this, I hope that with the book and the comic strips, I'm hoping that I'll keep going with the liminal sneeze in some form, and just I guess let it tell me what way to go.
it seems a really fitting title, I think. It's almost as if there's a sneeze or a gust of wind blowing through the whole book. You know, and these butterflies and moments are caught and taken in this kind of liminality, as you say, in this movement that runs through. I had one last question about this book, and it's fitting that we're at the cover. Can you explain about the pink gloves, please? Which I don't know if they
No, I can.
you can't. It's an enigma.
And I'll say, because people won't know this, but Hugh, lovely Hugh, who's published this book, can't be with us tonight. He did send us pictures of him holding the book with pink gloves on. Now, I have never said anything about pink gloves, or I know the gloves have now turned pink on the front cover, but I'm not saying they were pink beforehand. I'm not even saying they're gloves. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, I think ask Hugh about the pink gloves.
Maybe it's Hugh's thing. We need to all question Hugh on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So would you, I know that you have a reading you'd like to do, so should I stop sharing screen of the Liminal Sneeze now and we go back to the kind of floating heads? Does that sound good?
Yeah, floating heads sound good. That's
okay,
yeah, well, I was just going to do a very short reading. Since this is the printed matter New York Art Book Fair, and New York's a very a place very close to my heart. I've been there quite a lot and stayed there for a bit, and also been to printed matter a few times. So I wanted to do something kind of connected with New York. And a comic book I made in 2007 was this comic book called A 52-Second Silence for Topsy. And this was all inspired by a description. I got this book called The Dawn of Cinema. And in it had a little description of this film called Electrocuting an Elephant. So a very, and I'll just quickly read this. So it's a description of the film, a truly disturbing early actuality spectacle in which a rogue elephant Topsy was electrocuted at Luna Park, Coney Island, after killing 3 people. Wooden sandals with deadly electrodes were fitted to Topsy's feet, and a 6,000-volt charge was forced through her body, toppling the elephant's 4-ton frame with steam rising around her. This event was viewed by a crowd of 1,500 people, and the electrician in charge was nearly electrocuted himself. So I read this description and I was very upset by it. And there was also the image of Topsy in the book. I don't know if you can see that, but and it was one of those things that just kind of immediately it got to me, and I wanted to make a piece of work about it. So I had this idea of making the comic, and in the comic, what I did was I just did 52 pages. The reason it's called 52 Second Silence for Topsy was at the time, due to technology, there would have been only 52 seconds of film, and I thought it was interesting that Topsy wasn't even given a minute's silence. It was 52 seconds. And I just drew Topsy over and over again. And this was kind of my tribute to her. And I used to have a cat called Topsy as well, so it had another meaning in that sense. And the last thing I'll say about it was when I was in New York and I went to the Coney Island Museum, I actually met the woman that worked at the museum. Her dad's friend was one of the keepers that was killed, and that's when I finally watched the film. So this was a couple of years after I'd made the comic, and she told me that the keeper had been putting cigarette butts out on poor Topsy, and she said, like an elephant, she didn't forget, and jumped on him, and that was the end of him. So yeah, so it's a sort of important New York kind of connection for me. So I thought I'd do just a short reading, and hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
There will be a little bit of silence in this, just to warn you. So yeah, okay. We've not got very long left, guys. So just yeah, it's a very short reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Malcy.
Pleasure.
I think we have just a few seconds left. The Zoom bots are going to kick us out. So I don't know if there's anything, maybe if you want to close out the meeting.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry we've not got any time for any questions, but yeah, I hope some of that was of use and interesting. I always find it quite difficult to talk about my work in some ways, but